The Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions will please come to order. We're holding a hearing today on Food and Drug Administration user fee agreements, improving medical product regulation and innovation for patients, Part 1. Now, Senator Murray and I will each have an opening statement, then we'll introduce our panel of witnesses, and after our witness testimony, senators will have 5 minutes of questions. The subject today is the Food and Drug Administration's medical device and drug user fees. Seems like a long time ago, but it really wasn't very long ago that Congress passed the 21st Century Cures Act. 94 senators voted for it. President Obama and Vice President Biden were strongly in support of it, so were Speaker Ryan, and Mitch McConnell called it the most important piece of legislation in the last Congress. That came through this committee, and I thank the members of the committee especially for resolving our differences of opinions and making it possible for us to reach consensus. That bill was about moving medical products, drugs, and devices more rapidly in a safe way through the investment and the regulatory process and into the hands of patients and doctors' offices. Today we're talking about really implementing that great goal, one that shows so much promise for virtually every American. We're here to talk about how we continue to fund the Food and Drug Administration, which is the agency responsible for making sure the promising research supported by 21st Century Cures actually reaches patients. We'll hear from witnesses from the agency itself to tell us how the user fee agreements will improve the agency's abilities to regulate medical products and promote innovation. We'll hear from patients, device manufacturers, and brand generic drug manufacturers in a second hearing, which is tentatively scheduled for April the 4th. I want to thank the witnesses for taking the time to testify today. We respect the great amount of expertise and service that you've given to our country. And I want to thank you also for moving so quickly to implement the 21st Century Act. I noticed especially that the provision involving regenerative medicine was published within about a month after President Obama signed the law. The first medical product user fee agreement was enacted in 1992. FDA worked with the drug manufacturers to hammer out an agreement that the agency would collect user fees from drug manufacturers in exchange for more timely, predictable reviews. The agreement was a success. It decreased review times and increased patient access to medicines. Before September 30th of this year, 4 different user fee agreements need to be reauthorized. The prescription drug user fee is the first one. Now, it's common around here to call it PDUFA. I'm not going to do that. I just can't stand PDUFA and MADUFA and KADUFA and the other UFA. So I'm going to call them, if you don't mind, the prescription drug user fee, which accounted for over 70% of the brand drug review in 2015. Second one's the medical device user fee, which accounted for 35% of the medical device review budget in 2015. The generic drug user fee accounted for 70% of generic drug review budget. The biosimilar user fee accounted for 7% of the biosimilar review budget. So a lot of the money for the FDA comes from these agreements with manufacturers of prescription drugs and devices. The authority for FDA to collect user fees for medical product review will expire on September 30 of this year, 6 months from now. Now, this is probably the most important part of what I have to say this morning. If we don't move quickly to authorize these agreements, the FDA will be forced to begin sending layoff notices to more than 5,000 employees to notify them they may lose their jobs in 60 days. That's what they have to do by law. A delay in reauthorizing these agreements would delay the review of drugs and devices submitted after April 1, only a few days away. For example, if we don't pass these reauthorizations into law before the current agreements expire, an FDA reviewer who gets started reviewing a cancer drug submitted to the agency in April would be laid off on October 1 before the reviewer is able to finish his or her work. The sooner we reauthorize the agreements, the better, to give patients, reviewers, and companies certainty. In addition to harming patients and families that rely on medical innovation, A delay in reauthorizing the user fees would threaten biomedical industry jobs and America's global leadership in biomedical innovation. I'm hopeful that this committee and this Congress can work on a bipartisan manner to reauthorize the user fees before the August recess. Congress must pass legislation reauthorizing and updating the fees to support the recommendations contained in what are called commitment letters sent to Congress in January. Now, these commitment letters are part of the agreements between the FDA and the industry. They establish the agency's commitments, such as timelines for application review, or to put out guidances in exchange for the fees that Congress authorizes. The letters were transmitted to Congress in January of this year. So today's hearing is not the first time members of Congress or the public is hearing about the recommendations for reauthorization. In Congress, while we were working on the 21st Century Cures, after it was signed into law, the Health Committee had 15 bipartisan hearings throughout that time, before it was signed into law and after it was signed into law, 21st Century Cures, some of which were in conjunction with the Energy and Commerce Committee in the House of Representatives, so that we could hear from FDA and industry about the reauthorization. The first of those briefings was back in late 2015. Outside of Congress, FDA posted meeting minutes after every negotiation and held public meetings to hear feedback. So the content of the commitment letters and the changes to the fee authorizations should not be new or a surprise for any member of this committee. After the April 4th hearing, I hope to move to mark up the legislation in committee as soon as possible. This is the first time the user fees have sunset in the first year of a new administration. So we're starting hearings a little later this year than we did in 2012. In order to get this done on time, any additional policies that senators may want to attach need to be broadly bipartisan, related to human medical products, and non-controversial in order to avoid slowing the package down. There are many improvements in the commitment letters and fee structures in these reauthorizations to be excited about. The prescription drug and medical device reauthorizations included many provisions that build on the work of 21st Century Cures, such as involving patients in the drug and medical device development, dedicated staff to assist in the development and review of rare disease drug, improved timelines, increased guidance for drug and device combination products, modernizing the clinical trial process. There are structural reforms. Each agreement contains reporting measures built both by the FDA and by independent third parties so we can see how the changes are working. FDA is going to work to implement full-time reporting by 2022, so Congress, patients, and medical product manufacturers will have a better picture about how resources are being used at FDA and understand what is needed to do what we ask. The biosimilar and generic drug user fees agreement includes additional staff and resources to approve more biosimilars and more generic drugs, which provide more competition and lower drug costs. These are just a few of the highlights of the reauthorization and commitment letters. It's a good agreement for patients, and I look forward to working with Senator Murray, and all the members of the committee to get it done expeditiously. Senator Murray.